Week. We're going to pass through it very quickly. I just wanted to go back and notice a couple points in chapter 5, and then we'll move forward with the text. Before we start, I'm going to ask Brother David if he would start us with a word of prayer.
Let's pray. Father, as we are here for this Lord's Day that you've blessed us with, we know it's gray and cloudy outside, but we know that from your word, there's a light that shines in our life, that there's a light that gives us purpose, there's a light that guides us in our footsteps, and we're thankful for that. We just ask you to be with our brother at this time as he's leading us in the study of your word. But Father, as always, we just ask you to open our hearts and our minds and our souls to be receptive to what's being taught to us, that we can apply it and learn from it. We also ask you, please be with those still traveling to be here with us today, that they be safe. But again, we're just thankful for this Lord's Day that you blessed us with. In Jesus' name, amen.
Great. Thank you, David. Okay. We'll get it here in a moment, guys. There we go. Can you see that? We're in Genesis chapter 45. I do want to thank Brother Don for teaching last Sunday, and he covered this chapter. Just want to make just a couple of quick points in review as we kind of get up to speed, and we'll get into chapters 46 here. In chapter 45, Joseph reveals himself to his brethren. After all of this contact in such an emotional context, and he is learning about his brothers, he's learning about his father and about their family. He finally, in chapter 45, it says, Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him, and he cried, cause every man to go out from me, and there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. And I want you to notice that Joseph recognizes that all of this has come about by the providence of God. Look at verse 5. And now he says, be not grieved nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life. So Joseph got it. He realizes why all of this has happened to him. Even though much of it was painful and unpleasant to him personally, God was bringing about the salvation of his people, the Israelites, by sending Joseph on ahead into Egypt and elevating him to such a status that he would be able to assist and, in fact, save his brethren. Also down in verse 8, so now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and Lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. So God was behind all of this, and Joseph recognizes that and put him in a position that in many ways was supervisory and caring for all of the kingdom of Pharaoh. Verse 9, haste ye and go up to my father and say unto him, thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. Again, he is affirming that this is God's doing. He doesn't take any credit for it himself, and he doesn't blame his brothers ultimately because he recognizes the providence of God. In verse 24. Pharaoh is sending them off. Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh there in verse 21. By the way, that's the first time that wagons are mentioned in the Bible. The Israelites had two-wheeled chariot-type vehicles that were ideal for traversing the deserts of that day, and they probably had developed four-wheeled carts or wagons for conveying large amounts of personal property. To all of them he gave each man changes of raiment. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of raiment. And to his father he sent after this manner 10 asses laden with the good things of Egypt, and 10 she-asses laden with grain and bread and provision for his father by the way. Look at verse 24. So he sent his brethren away, and they departed, and he said unto them, see that ye fall not out by the way. Some of your translations will say something like, see that you don't quarrel on the way, or see that you don't have a falling out on the way. That is, I think, very wise on Joseph's part. He's recognizing that they might blame themselves. They could fall into some kind of a quarrel as to who was more culpable or at fault. And he says, don't do that. God is going to take care of things. You go and get Dad and bring him and our people back here to Egypt for salvation. Any questions through chapter 45 before we begin in 46? Yes, Marvina.
Verse 8, it says, so now it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh. What is a father to Pharaoh? I know he's close to him, but is he younger? I mean, older than Pharaoh?
Well, he may be older, but I think primarily it involves a supervisory role over all of Pharaoh's kingdom. Basically, the name Pharaoh is put for the kingdom of Pharaoh. And Joseph is has been made supervisor over all of that. Not to Pharaoh personally. You know, another interesting thing there in that verse, though, Marvina referred to, verse 8, this is one of those not but expressions that we talk about in the Bible. Look at the wording there. So it was not you that sent me. Well, wait a minute. Wasn't it them that did send him? Yes. But the meaning of that expression is it was not primarily you, or not mainly you, but, and then there's the rest of the expression, not you, but God. That is, it was essentially or mainly God who was behind this. It's equivalent to Jesus saying, he that receiveth me, receiveth not me, but my Father. It means not only me, or primarily me, but in a larger sense, my Father. It's a not but expression, and we see that in the idiom and usage a lot in the Bible. Good question. Anything else on that chapter? Don.
I think it's very interesting, the difference between Joseph and his brothers. Joseph has forgiven, Joseph has faced whatever the situation is, and he adjusts to it. He's gotten through all of this trouble. But when we get to back to chapter 50, the brothers are still the victim of their guilty conscience.
Yes.
They still can't quite trust Joseph.
Yeah, and Joseph perceives that, doesn't he? Even at the end, he's tearful and emotional about the fact that this torturous sin in the family still pervades in some ways. But that's correct, I think, and also it shows that Joseph probably had some insight into that, even now when he says, don't you all quarrel on the way home. Don't spoil a good thing. Yes, David.
It's also interesting about how he was able to forgive his brothers for what they did, because the psalmist talk about how his feet hurt because he was in chains, and the fact that he had wrapped around his neck an iron collar.
Yeah.
And those are images that you just don't forget overnight. If you're saying, "Oh, I forgive you for doing this to me."
Right. Joseph here, as David points out, is a real model of forgiveness for us. He had really been sorely mistreated, had suffered greatly in prison and in other ways, deprivations that had been brought upon him because of the way he had been mistreated. And it all seemed so unfair. It was unfair at the time. But God had a larger purpose in mind, and he recognized that. We need to remember that in our lives, Sometimes suffering endures for the night, but joy cometh in the morning. There is a need for some suffering in life, and sometimes there's a greater purpose in the eyes of God. Good thoughts. Anything else? All right, let's get into chapter 46 here. It says, "And Israel took his journey." I want to read the first 4 verses, which is a reaffirmation by God. Notice how he assures his men like Jacob at the critical times in their life. I'm with you. I haven't forgotten you. Go ahead and do this. It's going to work out. Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices unto the God of his father Isaac. And God spake unto Israel in the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. By the way, the repetition of the name is often a divine tactic. We see it repeatedly to seize attention and sometimes to impress upon the hearer the importance, the significance of what's about to be said. Can you think of any other cases where God did that? Samuel, yes. I'm thinking also of Moses at the burning bush. What about who? Saul of Tarsus, right, on the road to Damascus. Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? So he says, Jacob, Jacob, and he said, here am I. And he said, I am God, the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will also surely bring thee up again. And Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. Notice the precise prophecy, and this is it is a repetition in part of the promise that God had made to his forefathers. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to make of you a great nation. But now he's saying this is where it's going to happen. Go down into Egypt. Don't be afraid to go. And notice the prophecy in verse 4. I will also surely bring thee up again. What does that pre-shadow or look forward to? Yeah, the freeing of the Israelites out of Egyptian bondage, which is going to occur many years later. God is foreseeing that. I'm going to bring you down there, but I'm also going to bring you up. The phrase, Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes, seems to be a euphemistic reference to death itself, as if Joseph would render the last rites, as it were. When a person dies, sometimes their eyes remain open, and the person in attendance, often a physician or maybe a loved one, will gently close the eyes of the person in death. In colonial America, they used to close the eyes and put a coin on the eyes to hold the eyelids closed. And so there was an expression that developed, he's so dishonest he would steal the nickels off a dead man's eyes. Okay? But this is the idea. He will gently close your eyes in death. This should have been reassuring to Jacob. Not only am I going to be with you, but that's where you're going to ultimately die, but your son will be right there, your beloved Joseph, to put his hand upon thine eyes. All right. Now, also all of the goods are gathered there. We see in the next few verses. Look at verse 8. Now, these are the names of the children of Israel who came into Egypt, Jacob and his sons. And then you have a listing, verses 8 through 27, you have a listing of the sons of Jacob and their sons in return. There's also a couple of the daughters that are referred to here in the list. Their names are given, and that is a fascinating list to go through and review. If you haven't done that, I would encourage you to do that. Look at those names, and it sort of puts things back into perspective. What's the total number of persons referred to? All right, 66. Well, what's the total number given? The total number given is 70, right? Now, It is true over in Acts chapter 7, when Stephen is preaching that masterful sermon, he refers to the history of Israel, and he uses the number, I believe, 75 souls went down into Egypt. Now, it's obvious that Moses is speaking in round numbers, number one. This isn't intended as a critical formula in numbers. The point is, it is a complete representation of the beginning of the Israelite nation. And those extra 5 individuals may be accounted for. Joseph himself or his descendants may be included in Stephen's number when he said 75, whereas this number is talking probably specifically about those who came down into Egypt from the land of Canaan. All right. By the way, the number 70, why would that number really get the attention of the Hebrew reader? Why was it so significant in Hebrew history? Can you think of any other explanations there?
We would possibly say dozens.
Okay, as a figure of speech, we might say dozens. But what was significant about the number 70? All right, it's a sacred number in Israel's history. It means a full beginning of their nation. I meant to bring a source here, but if you look in a concordance at the number 70 and how many times that appears in the Bible, it's quite frequent. For example, the 70 weeks in Daniel's vision, the 70 disciples that Jesus sent forth, the 70, later there would be 70 scholars who would assemble and produce the Septuagint version. The Hebrews held the number 70 as a sacred number. And there are, 6 or 8 different references to that in the pages of the Bible. So it's not surprising that Moses uses that number as a memory mark. He says, you can remember that this is how our nation began. These are those who came down into the land of Egypt. So that list goes really all the way down through verse 27. And the total there in verse 27 says, all the souls of the house of Jacob that came into Egypt were 70. Again, if you add Joseph's who were already there, you might be at about 75. Okay? Questions on any of that? All right. Verse 28, and he sent Judah before him unto Joseph to show the way before him unto Goshen, and they came into the land of Goshen. Significant verse, I think. We saw before these chapters that we're looking at this morning that Judah was kind of the hero in saving Joseph, remember, and in standing up to his brothers. What is significant about Judah in the overall scheme of the book? The ancestor of Christ. He is the one, our writer keeps coming back to him. And here he is revealed as the one who actually leads the Israelites, the people of God, into their land of Goshen, the land of plenty, the fertile, rich life that they would enjoy there. You see how that prefigures Jesus Christ? Leading his people into pastures green and into a rich and full life of service to God. And Joseph, verse 29, made ready his chariot and went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen, and he presented himself unto him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. And Israel said unto Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen thy face, that thou art yet alive. And Joseph said unto his brethren and unto his father's house, I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and will say unto him, my brethren and my father's house, who were in the land of Canaan, are come unto me. Now, no doubt Joseph had already made these plans and these arrangements known to Pharaoh. He's not saying here, for the first time, I'm going to disclose all of this, but he's keeping Pharaoh posted every step of the way, so that Pharaoh is being informed about the progress of this whole venture. And he's also retaining Pharaoh's support, keeping Pharaoh interested and invested in the Israelite people. And he says, and the men are shepherds, for they've been keepers of cattle, and they've brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. It shall come to pass, when Pharaoh shall call you and shall say, what is your occupation? That ye shall say, thy servants have been keepers of cattle from our youth, even until now, both we and our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. It's interesting, we're told this in the Bible here, but this is the only real reference to this by which the Bible student knows this is true. But if you didn't have the Bible, you could check Egyptian history and find that this is indeed a fact, that the Egyptians looked down their noses at the cowboys and the keepers of sheep. It was a lowly, despised occupation. But the question is, why was this so important? Why are these facts noted here? It does confirm the authenticity of the Bible, but what is the connection to the progress of the text here? Why is this included? Anybody have a thought on that?
Well, the Israelites are favored at this point. Later on, they're going to be despised.
Yes, the Israelites are favored at this point. Later, that'll change. And what is there unique about the land of Goshen? It's well watered. It's well irrigated. Ideal, probably the best in Egypt for cattle. And what is so important about keeping God's people, the Israelites, up there in the land of Goshen, separate from the main body of people in Egypt? Why is that important? Yeah, they would tend to follow, the Israelites would tend to follow their gods, right, Bob?
Intermarry and lose their identity as
They would lose their identity. They would intermingle or intermarry or amalgamate themselves into the race of the Egyptian people and be lost. You see here again, God intervening providentially to keep his people preserved as a people. They were not to, what's the word? Assimilate is the word, thank you, I was looking for it. They were not to assimilate themselves into the culture. Now today in the United States, we make a big thing about saying, you know, people coming into our land need to assimilate into the culture. And we have a mixed culture, the result of many migrations from various countries. That was not the case here. God was intentionally keeping his people, the Israelites, separate. And now we see even agriculturally one of the tools that was used to accomplish that. All right, chapter 47, verse 1. Then Joseph went in and told Pharaoh. Now here is the formal consent given by Pharaoh. This is what I meant when I said Pharaoh is being kept abreast of what's happening. He's not in the dark. And I think this was very wise on Joseph's part. He keeps Pharaoh in touch, and not only that, but favorable toward what's happening. Notice what he says here. My father and my brethren and their flocks and their herds and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan. Behold, they are in the land of Goshen. And from among his brethren he took 5 men and presented them unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto his brethren, what is your occupation? And they said unto Pharaoh, Thy servants are shepherds, both we and our fathers. Now, interesting, what do you think was going through Pharaoh's mind when they said that? Was he impressed with that occupation favorably? No, not especially. He, like the others, probably looked down on that. Now, think about it. Psychologically, they are being given some of the choicest, well, they're being permitted to settle in some of the choicest land in the kingdom. A lesser man might have said, you know what, you're getting a pretty good deal here. You owe me. But this fact tends to offset that to some extent, so that Pharaoh is probably thinking, well, it's a wash. You're lowly kind. You can have this land because that's for grazing anyway. And during the famine, you're not going to get a lot of benefit from that. So he's reaffirming an arrangement that Joseph wanted and that God wanted all along for his people. And thinking, Pharaoh's probably thinking this is probably a pretty good arrangement. Yes, Don?
Well, he's also thinking about the advantage to himself. Because in the next verse he says, if you have capable men, put them over my cattle.
Yes. Yes. Don points out he's also thinking about his own cattle. The next verse says, verse 2, and from among his brethren he took 5 men and presented them unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said, what is your occupation? They said, we're shepherds, both we and our farmers, our fathers. Verse 4, and they said unto Pharaoh, to sojourn in the land are we come, for there's no pasture for thy servants' flocks, for the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. Now therefore, we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee. The land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and thy brethren to dwell. In the land of Goshen let them dwell. And if thou knowest any able men among them, then make them rulers over my cattle. And he didn't feel like he was really giving up that much, I think, at this point, particularly in light of the famine and the way things were. Okay? Questions on any of that? Pharaoh's gracious acknowledgement of the arrangement that Joseph wanted and that would be in the plan of God. All right, so the next few verses, 7 through 10, Pharaoh blesses Jacob, and I use that word advisedly. You look at the text, it says, Joseph brought in Jacob his father and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, how many are the days of the years of thy life? What's he asking there? How old are you? You're a pretty old fellow, aren't you? How old are you? And Jacob said, the days of the years of my pilgrimage. Interesting word. What does pilgrimage mean? Temporary sojourning. He realized, even now, look, he's just been deeded the best part of Egypt. And even now, he's still totally reliant upon God. He has been taught and trained through all of his years to realize this earthly life is temporary. What does the Hebrew writer say when he refers back to these patriarchs, and particularly Jacob? He looked for remember? A city that hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. He never lost sight. Jacob never lost sight of the real destination that really matters. All of this is temporary. Even the land of Goshen in Egypt is nothing compared to where I'm ultimately going. So he calls life itself a pilgrimage. There's a good lesson in that for us as well. And Jacob said, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life. Well, few, I guess, compared maybe to his father or grandfather, we might think that's a pretty long life. And he's going to live yet another, 17 years after this. So that we would think that's a pretty long life. But he realizes, like James said, life is a vapor. Even at that age, it appears for a little time, then vanisheth away. And he says, and my years have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. All right, so Jacob blesses Pharaoh. Verses 11 and 12, the Israelites are actually placed. Look at the wording there. Joseph placed his father and his brethren and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses. Now, there's a city named there. Did that city exist yet? No, not at the time of these events. It would later be built by whom? The Israelites under slave labor. Remember? But who the writer of this text is whom? Moses. He's writing this years later, remember, after that city had been built. And so here again is a historical marker. It is a sign of authenticity, so that when you read Moses here, you can think, and particularly when his original readers read him, they could say, oh yes, Ramses, I know where that is. I get you, Moses, I know what you're talking about. Even though he's speaking about a future event, that they were in the land of Ramesses as Pharaoh had commanded, and Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all his father's household with bread according to their families. That is, he provided for their physical needs. Verses 13 through 19 describe how Pharaoh obtains all of the land in the nation. And I want you income tax people to notice this especially. What is a round number for the average income tax that people pay in the United States of America? What percent? I know we have progressive income tax rates and it's not the same for everybody, but on average it's about 20%. About. And that is typical of many nations down through history. Now watch how that started, okay? There was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And when the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence, for our money faileth. Okay, what's their problem in a nutshell?
Can't buy food anymore.
We're out of money. And we're going to starve because we don't have money to buy bread. Okay, you think that could happen in our country? Now watch, we're reading history here. And Joseph said, give your cattle, and I will give for your cattle if money fail. All right, so after the cash in the bank comes what? Your livestock, your cattle. They had sheep, oxen, perhaps other livestock and cattle. They brought their cattle unto Joseph. Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, for the flocks, for the herds, for the asses, and he fed them with bread in exchange for all their cattle for that year. Now, how long was the famine supposed to last, or going to last? 7 years. So we're going to have to come up with some other provisions here. And when that year was ended, verse 18, they came unto him the second year and said unto him, we will not hide from my Lord how that our money is all spent, and the herds of cattle are my Lord's. There is not or nothing left in the sight of my Lord, but our bodies and our lands. What are they offering? Yeah, servitude, tax. Wherefore should we die before thine eyes, both we and our land? buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants. By the way, if you're a taxpayer, you're a servant. We will be servants unto Pharaoh and give us seed. Right, John? And some of us are bigger servants than others. And we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh and give us seed that we may live and not die, and that the land be not desolate. So they're saying the only way we can survive is if we pay tax, if we, in essence, become servants to the government, to you, Pharaoh. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. Isn't that interesting? Now, is the land of Goshen included in this? Pardon? Yes. Maybe. Hold that thought. For the Egyptians sold every man, this is the Egyptians now, sold every man his field because the famine was sore upon them, and the land became whose? Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he removed them to the cities, from one end of the border of Egypt even to the other end. Why did he move them to the urban areas? Food, distribution, makes sense. You can't graze on a plain of dust. There's no more agriculture going on because of the famine. He removed them to the cities from one end of the border of Egypt even to the other end. Only the land of, now before we look at that exception, I'm still not sure about the land of Goshen. He's talking here about primarily the rest of Egypt and what's happening in the least watered portions. He may also be including the land of Goshen. I'm not sure about that. If anybody had an advantage there, it would have been the Israelites. On.
So maybe one clue is Joseph was married to the daughter of the priest of On. If you look on your map, you won't find On, but you'll find Heliopolis from much later. That's what the Greeks renamed the city.
Okay.
And that is right on the border of the land of Goshen. So that's the only clue we have.
Okay. Interesting that the priests come into this. Look at the exception in verse 22. Only the land of the priests bought he not. For the priests had a portion from Pharaoh, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them, wherefore they sold not their land. So the priests were permitted to retain their land, but otherwise all the land becomes the property of Pharaoh. Then Joseph said unto the people, Behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Lo, here is seed for you, and ye shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass at the ingatherings that ye shall give a fifth unto Pharaoh, and 4 parts shall be your own, for seed of the field, and for your food, and for them of your households, and for food for your little ones. And they said, Thou hast saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. They actually considered this proposal, which was generous in light of the fact that they were going to die otherwise, they recognized this is a salvation from Joseph. The people of Israel agree to a 20% tax going forward now in future harvests. Okay? Thou hast saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord. And Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt unto this day. It's just like all taxes. Once they get started, it's pretty hard to ever get them stopped. And this 20% continued. God's people had been taught, or would be taught formally, to lay by in store, to give the tithes of the old law. So they were accustomed to giving. But this was a new concept in the land of Egypt, that Pharaoh should have the fifth. Only the land of the priest alone became not Pharaoh's. Questions on chapter 47? Yes.
Priests, now, are these still the Israelite people, not
No, I think he's talking now about the Egyptian priests, the priests throughout the land of Egypt. Okay? Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
There would not be any Israelite priests yet.
The priesthood had not been, the priesthood to which you're referring, I don't think, had been set up yet. That'll be the descendants of Levi. Remember, Levi himself has just come into the land with certain sons. But how many sons did he have? Kohath, the Kohathites, the Merabites, remember there's about 4 sons there. Nadab and Abihu were sons of Aaron, but there were about 4 sons of Levi under the Levitical priesthood. So they're there, but that's it. All right. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they got them possessions therein, were fruitful, multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So there's your reference as to his age. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. And the time drew near that Israel must die. And he called his son Joseph and said unto him, If now I have found favor in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh. Remember, we saw that's a solemn oath procedure or custom among the ancient Hebrews, and it signifies a binding oath, irrevocable. Deal kindly and truly with me. Bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. What was the one land that Jacob owned? The cave of Machpelah, remember, which he had purchased and buried. I'm sorry. Who had purchased it? Abraham had purchased it. And he was buried there, and Sarah was buried there, and the other ancestors here of Jacob. But when I sleep with my fathers, he said, thou shalt carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place. And he said, I will do as thou hast said. And he said, swear unto me. And he sware unto him, and Israel bowed himself upon the bed's head. Some of your translations may say, leaning upon his staff. That's the quote from the book of Hebrews. As it turns out, those words are very, very similar in the original Hebrew. Bedstead and staff are virtually identical words. And so it is believed that some corruption entered into the text there. He's saying one or the other, but the Hebrew writer follows the Septuagint translation, I think, which says, leaning upon the head of his staff. Doesn't matter, I guess. It's maybe not a big deal. But the point is, it was solemnized with formality. It was binding. This was a very significant promise. And why did it mean so much to Jacob to be buried not in Egypt? Why is he worried about this?
Because the land of Canaan was promised to his father and through it and promised to him.
Yeah, and he understood, didn't he, Jim? In the future, this is where we're going to be. This is our land. It's as good as gold. It's promised by God himself. That's where I'm always focused and looking to the promised land. That's where I want my treasures laid up. Okay? I want to go to heaven. That's where we're going. And so that's where we need to keep the emphasis here. That's what he did. Bob.
And when God spoke to him as he was coming into Egypt, he told him that he would be brought back.
Exactly. He didn't let him forget that, did he? I'm letting you go down. Now I'm going to bring you back up. Yes, Don.
The interesting thing is when God makes these promises about the land of Canaan, he always refers to it as which I have given you, even though they don't possess it yet.
Yeah. Don makes the point that he's speaking in past tense, but it's because it's a predictive prophecy by God. It's as good as done. It's called the prophetic past tense. We see it over and over in the Old Testament. Isaiah 53 is a real good example of that. And we know that that's a prophetic prophecy because that's the passage that Philip uses specifically to refer to Jesus Christ in teaching the Ethiopian eunuch. And yet it was written in past tense. So that was a prophetic technique to show the surety of God's promises. Well, look, we are almost out of time. I'm not going to get into chapter 48, except to say, Lord willing, next week we want to finish the book of Genesis. I would encourage you to read carefully chapter 49, especially the first 27 verses. This is the deathbed blessing by Jacob of his sons. And there's information given there that doesn't appear anywhere else in the Bible. And it helps you get a good feel for what is going to become of these 12 tribes down through history. It is uttered by inspiration. Obviously, Jacob couldn't have predicted these things. So he's doing it with the help of God himself. But it's fascinating reading for us today, all the way from Reuben, all the way down through Benjamin. Okay? Thank you for your time this morning. We'll stop there and start